Welcome back to Fitzalan Chapel here at Arundel Castle. I want to introduce you to some of the people who are actually buried here and talk a little bit about what they actually achieved and what we can actually see when we're looking at their tombs. I'd like to introduce you to Thomas Fitzalan, the 5th Earl of Arundel, and his wife Beatrice of Portugal. I'm not going to go into great details about what the tomb is made out of or who the manufacturer was. I'm more interested in the person, and Thomas himself lived a very, very interesting life. Now I'm only going to give you a snapshot of what he was about, because what I'm hoping is that you'll come to the Fitzalan Chapel, you'll ask the guides, you'll ask the staff here and find out more about him. He was 16 when his father was executed in the time of Richard II, and he spent time in France with his uncle Henry Bolingbroke, who would eventually come back to this country and become our King Henry IV. He supported the monarchy throughout the early years of the wars of the 100 Years' War with France. He fought against the French on more than one occasion. He eventually, in 1415, supporting the new King Henry V, go to France as part of what would become the Agincourt campaign. And he, right at the start of that campaign, was at the siege of Harfleur, and he was in charge of the siege engines. He was very, very loyal to Henry V, but sadly he and a lot of his men suffered badly from dysentery and had to return to this country, where subsequently he died. So what we're dealing with then is a man, a military man, and when we look at this gentleman, he is not dressed in armour, which is unusual perhaps for a person buried of his sort of status within the country. Why would he have married a woman from Portugal? Well, there's lots of alliances going around, and Henry of Lancaster, Henry Bolingbroke, had actually married his sister to John of Portugal, and this was John's illegitimate daughter, Beatrice. So they're trying to make connections with other countries around Europe. Why? Because it's all about building up allies. So Thomas is a very interesting person, and I hope you come and find more out about him, particularly in the light of what he was actually doing militarily-wise. But he died as a result of that campaign to try and seize the French throne in the year 1415. This is John Fitzalan, who was the 7th Earl of Arundel, portrayed in his full armour and also heraldic tabard. And when we're talking about heraldry, in the past it was very, very important to identify people, particularly important people on the battlefield, and who was supporting them. There was no standard English uniform at this time. You've got to wait till the Tudors take over, when the first uniforms were green and white. So this time every lord had his own coat of arms. So here we have Thomas, who has the Maltravers knot, which is this section. Very similar, mine's a smaller version of this. So this is the Maltravers knot. And on the other side is the Fitzalan lions. This is the union of two families, the Fitzalans as Earls of Arundel and Baron Maltravers, and the title which is still within the Duke of Norfolk's family even today. This then is portraying a man who was very much a military man, and I want to just deal with the end of his life in the year 1435, in the reign of Henry VI, King of England at this time. Thomas was a very prominent commander and had fought the French on many, many, many occasions, and found himself trapped in a three-sided field. He had been the rear guard as the English were retreating from advancing French forces. What normally happened in this period in history is the English knew they were always outnumbered by the French, so had devised a system whereby if they could have a large amount of archers on the field, and each English archer would be expected to shoot 15 arrows per minute. So you can imagine that 10,000 archers shooting for 15 minutes is 2.5 million arrows would fall upon the enemy in the battle. So they were trying to kill the enemy at a distance. If the French cavalry got too close to the English, the chances are they would just roll straight over them. So here we have then Thomas in this three-sided field, and the open part of the field is where the French are mustering. The English then set their wooden stakes in front of their archers. The archers then are ready to shoot down the length of the field, try and stop that French charge. But the French don't attack. In fact, the French do something very, very unheard of. They actually bring up small cannons, small pieces of artillery. And these traditionally had only been used to make holes in walls to gain access into a castle during the siege. But the French commander at this point then used artillery against Thomas's forces. So they were lobbing stone shots down the field towards the English. Thomas suffered a huge injury. One of his feet was smashed, if not ripped off. And there he is lying there in a pool of blood, refusing initial treatment, saying that this is an unchivalric weapon that has taken me down. As a knight, as an earl, he would be expected to die with being hacked by a sword or an axe or taken down by a lance. So by refusing that treatment, subsequently gangrene set in. The leg was then subsequently removed, but then he died later on of blood poisoning. His squire was managing to retrieve the body much later and then brought it back here to Arundel, where he was subsequently buried. The tomb was opened up in the 19th century, and they did find a man who was over 6 feet tall with a missing leg. The tomb itself shows then the mortality. Here I am in life as a brave warrior, a respected man, who was actually dubbed and nicknamed the English Achilles for losing his leg. But here I will become exactly the same as you, as everybody else. I will decay, but his memory lives on. So here's an example of one of the first people to die of an action on a battlefield as a result of cannon shot. Within 5-10 years, everyone's now using cannons on the battlefield. They saw the advantage, not only the distance weapon, but also the fear that that will also bring as well. I'd like to introduce you then to William Fitzalan, who was the 9th Earl of Arundel, and his wife, formerly Joan Neville. This is the time of the Wars of the Roses, and the Fitzalans as Earls of Arundel had predominantly supported the Yorkist cause. This isn't just a conflict between two counties. It's not Yorkshire versus Lancashire, as a lot of people like to imagine. This is the Plantagenet family who were tearing the country apart in this feud of who had the right to be king, who was the legitimate king, who was the strongest and fit enough and able enough to become king. So they were supporting the Yorkist cause. Now interestingly here we've got a very complex situation where William is married to Joan, and Joan's brother was a man called Richard. He was the Earl of Warwick. And Warwick actually switched sides during the Wars of the Roses and ended up fighting for the Lancastrian cause, and subsequently died upon the battlefield. Possibly, if not William was there, then maybe his son was there at the Battle of St Albans. The tomb itself is in remarkably good condition, mainly because it was actually on a higher structure and therefore wasn't so badly damaged or affected when the chapel was badly damaged during the English Civil War many years later. So there is a huge amount of medieval paint still on these effigies, which again it's remarkable that it survived this long. William is the last of the true medieval earls. He would then be at the coronation of Henry VII. He and his son Thomas Maltravers, who became the 10th Earl, were never really trusted by the Tudors, and although they gained some good positions, they never really attained the high rank that perhaps their family had deserved and fought for. So William is an interesting figure really, because as I said, he's the end of the medieval period. William is dressed in civilian clothing, and again we can see that they are both at the height of fashion for the end of the 15th century. So we just wanted to give you really a glimpse of some of the people who are buried here in the Fitzalan Chapel here at Arundel Castle, in the hope that when you visit, you won't just walk straight in, look around and walk straight out. There is a huge amount of information that I haven't given you. There's a huge amount of things to see that we haven't shown you. So I'm hoping that it's just whetted your appetite enough to come here and say, tell me more about this person when you meet the guides.